kids, 9 and an 8 and a 3-year-old, which is always fun if you have toddlers. um, I have spent the last 18 years working with teens. I spent the first 10 years as a high school teacher, and the last 8 years, 8 to 10 years as a therapist. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, a licensed professional clinical counselor. And really the difference between the two, people are like, what's the difference? Um, Clinical counselors work with individuals and with adults, whereas marriage and family therapists, I work with couples and then with families. So it's kind of a comprehensive, like I kind of work with a lot of people. And I'm also a parenting coach. And what I do now is I work a couple days a week at a high school in California. I live in Idaho, so I'm actually working remotely. And then I also have a private practice. And then I also run a group for parents of tweens and teens. That is very much my niche. It's what I'm very passionate about, is those teen years that are just so tricky, and really empowering parents. I think the adolescent years are hard for everybody. I don't know one person that was like, oh, the teen years were easy, right? Middle school, high school, they're tough. Um, but we don't have to make them tougher than they need to be, And I think, especially as parents, and I have felt this as a parent, that sometimes I just feel a little lost. I don't know what to do, which is why I'm so excited to talk with you guys. Is like, how do we figure it out? Like, how do we figure it out as parents? Of like, how do I do this? How do I parent my unique kid? So yeah, it's a little bit about me. As we are going along, I encourage you, if you've got questions or comments, to put them in the chat. I want to make sure that we hit all the points. And kind of what my vision for how we'll go tonight. I know we have about an hour. I have a presentation that I'm gonna share with you guys, and then at the end, I'll leave time for questions. I am a natural teacher, so I constantly am like asking questions, or how do you feel? I'm a therapist. How do you feel about it? So I invite you, as we go through the presentation, to think about those things. You could jot them down, put them in the chat, however you feel comfortable sharing. I think so much of parenting involves our hearts, it involves our minds and our feelings. It's this whole body experience, right? So I'm going to tap into that a little bit. So the book that we are going to talk about tonight is this one, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. This is a very long book, okay? Like, there's a lot of goodness in here. And when I sat down to prepare the presentation tonight, I was overwhelmed, because there's just so much goodness in this book. And I had a really hard time, honestly, like distilling it down and saying, okay, am I going to focus on like all of it and just scratch the surface, or do I want to hone in on one? It was a very hard decision. I did decide to do an overarching, like kind of like overview of everything, so we can get a taste of it all. And then at the end, if there was one that really stuck out to you or grabbed your attention, you want to ask a question about, I encourage you to do that. I also encourage you at some point to read the book. It's just got so much goodness in it. Something that I really love about this book is they actually also have a teen version, How to Talk. I have to read it because it's so long. How to Talk So Your Teens Will Listen, and Listen So Your Teens Will Talk. And then it's the daughter of the original author and her colleague. They have one for if you have young kids, so ages 2 to 7. Now the original book, it definitely applies to, I think, toddlers through teens, but the two that I mentioned that have followed it are more specific to the teen years or the younger years. So if you have a kid in those age ranges, this book will absolutely apply. But if you want even more detailed suggestions, I would recommend checking out those books. Okay, so let's get this party started. I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can kind of follow along, because like I said, there's so much stuff in this book that I was like, if me just talking about it, especially if you're like a visual learner, it's just too much. So here we go. Let me get this going. All right, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, we're good? Okay, cool. All right, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. This book is by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. They are the same authors of the teen version. The little kid version is is Faber and someone else. It's Adele Faber's daughter, actually. And then I am Cara Morales. There's all the letters, MALMFT, Those are all my credentials. There's a lot of letters, I know, and parenting coach. Okay. This is the opening sentence of the book. And it's one of my favorite sentiments because I know I have experienced this. The author says, I was a wonderful parent before I had children. I was an expert on why everyone else was having problems with theirs. And then I had 3 of my own. As parents, as humans, like we have ideas of like what parenting should be like, or ideas of how a kid should behave. And maybe this has happened to you where someone will give you an opinion on parenting, and especially maybe your kid. This has happened to me, like my own children. And I'm like, oh, how many kids do you have? And they say none. And I'm like, I don't know if I care for your opinion right now on this topic that you have no experience on, right? I just think this was such a relatable statement, right? That these authors, they have kids of their own. And yes, they are clinicians, but so much of parenting, yes, like data and statistics are important, but experience is important, right? And I just love the authenticity of the authors, and they weave in the stories of their kids, which is really cool. And here's the reality is the kids don't come with a manual. Like there's lots of parenting books out there like this one. This is a great book. I have like a whole library in my office here of books that I love. And they're all really good, but your particular kid, my particular kids did not come with their own manual of like, this is how you need to parent Hunter. Hunter is my oldest. You're going to hear a lot about Hunter. Or this is how you parent your particular toddler. And so it's tricky. I can read all the books. I can go to all the sessions. I can go to all the workshops. I can go to therapy. I can hire a parenting coach, but it's hard because our kids don't come with a manual. And so I appreciate books like these. I appreciate moments like this where we can come together as parents and say, all right, I'm going to talk about the best of the best data and the best of the best techniques, but what and how do I apply that to my unique kid? Because your kid is one of a kind. My kids are one of a kind. You are one of a kind as a parent. So how do we maximize on that, right? Like, how do I be the best parent for what my kid, teen or tween needs, right? Okay, so the book really is a new way of relating. It's a new way of interacting with our kids, whether they're toddlers, elementary, tween, or teen. And there are 5 main areas that the authors talk about. I'm going to just toss them up on the screen real quick. See why there's so much writing, right? Okay. These are the 5 areas, and we're going to go through each one of these 5, and I'm going to share just a little bit about each one, okay? But these are the 5 areas that the book talks about: feelings, cooperation, basically getting our kids to do what we need them to do; punishment; autonomy, and autonomy is that idea of they become their own person one day. And it actually really starts in the toddler years and is more important the older they get, especially when they hit the teen years. And then praise. So those are the 5 areas of the book and the 5 areas that we're going to chat about tonight. So let's start with feelings. Okay, let's pretend that you have a really bad day at work. And you come home from work and you want to talk to your spouse, partner, husband, wife, or maybe you call a friend that you just want to vent about that day. Your boss was a jerk. It was really frustrating. You felt misunderstood. As I read through some of these responses, I want you to imagine, how would you feel, right? You had this bad day at work and you want to talk about it, and you start to talk about it to this person, and they say things like, wow, you have really no reason to be upset. That really doesn't sound like that's big of a problem. You should just get over that. It really can't be that bad. Or, life is just like that. You just have to get over it, roll with the punches, take things in stride. Or, you know what I think you should do? You should go talk to your boss tomorrow and send them this email. Or you get peppered with questions. Well, what did you say? And then what did they say? And what did your emails, what was your signature of your email? Or maybe they start to defend the other person. Well, maybe your boss just was having a bad day. Maybe their boss was a jerk to them, and that's why they were a jerk to you. Or maybe they start to psychoanalyze you. You know what your real problem is that you have this unmet need, and then blah, 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 right? In all of those scenarios, our feelings were dismissed. They were ignored in one way or another. Whether they defended the other person or they offered advice or they denied the feelings were not acknowledged. They were ignored. And my question is this, and the authors ask the same question: how do we as adults typically to respond to children's feelings? Do we ignore them? Do we say things like, you're making a mountain out of a molehill? You shouldn't be that upset. Oh, your toy broke. That's not that big of a deal, right? Or do we acknowledge them? And I don't think that any parent is 100% of the time, like 100% of the time you acknowledge or 100% of the time you ignore. It's usually there's a balance, a ratio. But this point is really important to consider because feelings are funny. Every human has them on the planet, whether we deny them or overemphasize them. We all have feelings. When feelings are ignored, regardless of what age you are, they grow. There's something that happens in the brain when I have a feeling and I feel, upset, angry, sad, whatever it is. If I'm not allowed to feel that feeling or express that feeling, I will feel unsafe, unseen, unheard, misunderstood, and it will actually get bigger. I'll feel more feelings, and they're usually more negative. But if my feelings are acknowledged, if I come home after that bad day with my at work and I talk to my husband and he says, "Wow, Cara, that sounds like it was really hard." I feel soothed. I feel seen. And the feeling starts to diminish when it's a negative one. It's really powerful when we offer empathy, whether it's to our friends, our colleagues, our spouses, and especially our kids. So, to help a child deal with their feelings, the authors recommend four things. One, you want to listen with your full attention. Have you ever had to try to have a conversation with someone when they're only half listening, right? They're like, uh-huh, uh-huh, they're on their phone, right? Or they have the news on. It's extremely frustrating because it sends the message of you aren't important enough. Whatever your message is not important enough for me to pay attention to. So when our kids come to us with a feeling, especially a negative feeling, we want to give them our full attention. And this can be hard to do. I struggle with this a lot because I'll be doing dishes. Oh, I can multitask, right? I really can't. Not in a way that says to my kid, "You have my attention." Last night I was answering some emails on my phone, and my daughter, she's 8, Maddie, and she was like, "I just want to play a game with you, Mom." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll play the game." And I'm on my phone at the same time. I wasn't really playing the game, right? We got to give our kids our full attention. Secondly, acknowledge their feelings with just a word, something like, "Oh." My kid comes home and says, "Oh, I was really frustrated with this today." Oh. And what happens is they keep talking. It's like this invitation, like one, it tells them, "I'm paying attention, I hear you." And then it's this invitation to keep talking. You can just say, "Hmm, hmm," like just a sound. Or, "Oh, I see." You could even say, "Tell me more." That might feel a little like my kids know I'm a therapist and they're like, "Mom, don't therapize me." So I don't necessarily go with "tell me more," but something like, "Oh, I see." It keeps them talking and it gives them permission of, "Hey, I want to see the feeling. I'm acknowledging your feeling." Third thing, give their feelings a name. Maybe some of you have seen like feelings charts or feeling wheels. Kids feel, but they're not good at interpreting. They're not good at naming it. And sometimes we fear if I name it, if I give it more attention, it's going to get worse. But what actually happens when you name a feeling, you are able to tame it. Name it to tame it. Dan Siegel is a very famous a neuropsychiatrist, and he uses this phrase, name it to tame it. When we are able to help our kids name their feeling, it feels like they can get their arms around it. They understand their inner world, like what's going on in them. So if they feel embarrassed, but they don't know that word, they're describing what happened. "Oh, I went to play kickball and I missed the ball and it went by me and I felt really stupid." Wow. Did you maybe feel embarrassed? You felt embarrassed? And yes, Mom, I felt embarrassed, it's really powerful. The fourth thing they say is we want to, my notes, give them their wishes and fantasy. Okay, when I first read this, I was like, what does this mean? Okay, so as adults, we have fully formed brains, which means that our like logic and thinking center fires really hard in our brain. So when I'm presented with a problem, a negative emotion, I'm like, "Oh, this is the problem and this is how we're going to solve it." Kids' brains don't work that way. Our brains are not fully developed till they're 25. So this is true for up to our 25-year-olds. When something happens, they respond with emotion and they are in feeling mode. And we want to kind of get into that space with them and be playful about it. So for example, I left to go pick my kids up from school, my older kids from school, and I had my 3-year-old, and he really wanted chocolate milk. And we were driving, this happened today, about an hour ago. We were driving and he's in the back, I want chocolate milk. I want chocolate milk. And I'm like, okay, buddy, but mommy's driving. The chocolate milk's at home. I will get it for you when you get home. No, I want it now. And so I said, I wish I could make it appear. I wish I had a magic wand and I could point my magic wand and the chocolate milk would appear. Wouldn't that be great? He's like, that would be great. I get it when I get home. He doesn't use pronouns sometimes. Okay, right? When we feed into that fantasy, that playfulness, it disarms their feelings. It says, I'm listening to you. I'm acknowledging your feeling. I know that you want that. And let's kind of play it out. And usually it moves them to this place where they can think a little more logically. It's a really important step. So these 4 things: full attention, acknowledge with just one word, give their feelings a name, and the fantasy piece. Those are 4 ways that we can help our kids deal with their feelings. And it's funny, when we do these things, when we acknowledge the feelings, it actually helps our kids cope with their feelings quicker. When we ignore the feelings, they tend to ruminate on their feelings and they'll sit in them for hours or even days. It's very true for teens. But if I acknowledge it, it's like they move through it faster. And not that the goal is to be faster, but the goal is to be effective. It's much more effective. One thing that the authors in the book do, and I love this, is after every chapter, they'll give the examples of what to do, and then they'll give you cautions, like just be careful. And so some of the cautions that they'll say in dealing with feelings is, don't repeat the exact words. And this is very, very true for teenagers. If your teen says, I'm so mad, and you say, wow, you're really mad, they're going to say, duh, I just said that. So find a way to paraphrase it, or maybe acknowledge with just a word. Okay. Another thing they say is, don't respond with more intensity than what your child displays. So you want to offer empathy and get in the feeling with them, but if they're mad, don't get more mad, right? Like you want to be that calm place, right? To provide kind of that safe harbor. So we got to rein in our feelings, which can be really hard as parents. That could be a whole other talk. The last caution they give is, if your kid's not a talker, and this might be true more for the older ones, tweens and teens, or maybe their personality, they're just not a talker, we can never underestimate the power of our presence. That's something, if you're listening with full attention and you offer the one word, sometimes it's just us being in the same space with them. That's all they need. They don't need to keep talking about it. The other thing I would offer is that there's a lot of data to suggest that hugs are very healing, at least for 6 seconds, which sounds like a long time, or maybe it doesn't. But there's something about the nervous system that when we are touched, when we are hugged, it just really relaxes the body. And so this might work better with younger kids than teens, especially if they're not a touchy-feely person. But we can never underestimate the power of presence and touch. Okay, feelings. Whew, let's go to the next one. Cooperation. All right. This is, I think, one of the hardest things about being a parent is we want our kids to cooperate. I just want you to do what I told you to do, right? It's a struggle. Whether your toddler refuses to potty train, which I'm in that boat right now, and it is frustrating. I just need him to go to potty in the potty, but he doesn't want to do it. He keeps telling, I'm gonna do it later, Mom. The struggle of behavior, it's a battle of needs. What do they need versus what do I need? I took my kids to church the other day, my 3-year-old, and the church is a very old church. It's like 100 years old. So when you step on the floor, it creaks and the pews creak. I needed my 3-year-old to sit still. He needed to move. It was a battle of needs, right? And a lot of times what we try to do doesn't work. So for example, my son Hunter's room looks like a bomb went off in it at all times. There's clothes everywhere. There's toys everywhere. There's cups everywhere. If I walk in there and I say, wow, this place is disgusting, he's not going to respond well to that, right? If I'm blaming, if I'm accusing, if I'm name calling, if you do that one more time, I'm gonna take all your toys away. That happens a lot. Like I guilty that we make these threats, right? Or maybe we go into lecture mode. Every child, every human on the planet hates to be lectured. Like we just do. It's just in our nature, right? Especially our tweens and teens. We go into lecturing, or we go into warning mode. We go into comparison mode. If you were more like your sister, or we go into prophecy mode. No one's ever going to want to be your friend if you do that. It just doesn't work. We got to find a different way. If it's a battle of needs and what I'm doing isn't working, I got to find a new way, right? To engage cooperation. I love that phrase, engage cooperation. How do we get both of our needs met, right? Okay, so here are their tips. Number one, describe what you see or the problem. So, like in the example of my son's room, it is more effective if I walk into the room and I say, wow, there are a lot of dirty clothes on the floor. Just describe it. I don't describe him. I don't put a label on it. I don't say, oh, this is bad. I just describe what I see. I describe the problem. It's really hard for us to know what to do or what needs to be done if I'm worried about me, right? If I go with, wow, Hunter, you're disgusting. Your room is disgusting. He's going to be more concerned about what I said about him than about his pants all over the floor, right? So describing the problem kind of takes that off the table, that being concerned about us. What is my parent saying about me? It also gives them the chance to figure out what to do. There's a really important shift that happens in the brain of kids. When they are kids, they are concrete thinkers. Everything's very black and white, very simple. It fits in the box. But when they become tweens and teens, they start to move into abstract thinking. And we really want to empower their brains to make this shift. And if I just tell him what to do, he doesn't get the chance to problem solve. He doesn't get the chance to make that important brain shift. But if I say, wow, there's a lot of dirty cups up here, and dirty cups are supposed to go in the sink, his brain will start to process and think, oh, I should take the dirty cups downstairs, right? Second thing they recommend is you want to give information. Part of us as parenting is we're teaching, right? We're teaching our kids about life. My daughter loves to eat cereal. And every day she gets out the milk and she leaves the milk on the counter every day. And it is frustrating because I come downstairs, I'm like, why is the milk on the counter? So I say to her, hey, Maddie, if you leave milk out, it's going to curdle and it gets gross. And then we have to throw it out. And then you won't have milk for your cereal tomorrow. And I just leave it at that. And she goes and picks the jug up and puts it away. A third thing that they recommend is say it with a word. This is one of my favorite ones. It works with feelings. It also works with cooperation. So the other day, my son, he gets hangry. And when he's hungry, he's very angry. My husband's the same way. And Hunter's stomping around the kitchen. He's like, where's the chips? And I need a sandwich. And he's barking orders. And me, I'm sitting there and I'm getting super upset because I'm like, you should not bark orders at people. You should not bark orders at your mother. I do so much for you. My brain's going off, right? And so I looked at him and I said, hey, Hunter, did you know that you can attract more bees with honey than vinegar? And he's like, what are you talking about, bees? I need a sandwich. I'm like, no, you attract more bees with honey than you do vinegar. And he stopped. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, when I put out a plate of honey, the bees are going to come. If you want something in life, if you're sweet and kind and use the right tone of voice, you usually get what you need. And he stopped and he's like, hey, Mom, do you know where the chips are? It caused this shift in him. And what's been really cool since that happened is I notice him stomping and he's hangry or something else. I'll say, hey, Hunter, you attract more bees with honey. There's even been times where I can condense it to one word and I'll say honey or I'll say bees and something goes off in his brain. If we can condense things as parents to phrases or to words, it is very powerful. Or like I see the milk on the counter. I don't need to go give Maddie the information every single time. I can just say milk and she'll go put it back, right? Another one they talk about is talking about your feelings. And not that we like are me monsters as parents or anything like that, but we're human. We have feelings. And when we share them with our kids, they respond. Like they love us. They want us to be happy. And so for an example, like if my 3-year-old comes up to me and he's yanking on my shirt trying to get my attention, I'll get really frustrated. I'll be like, stop touching me. Or I could say, hey, Max, you're going to rip mommy's shirt. I get upset when you do that. Please don't do that. If I talk in the I statement, one, I'm connecting with him, but two, it gives him a chance to kind of respond differently. And then I'm not snapping at him, right? When we talk about our feelings, and this tends to work a little bit better with the older kids, especially our tweens and teens, we're not making comments about their character. We're really talking about ourselves. And it can be really, really powerful. The last thing they talk about is writing a note. This actually might be my favorite one. I take it back about the word. Write it with a note. Sometimes we just talk too much. And this goes back to the lecturing. And sometimes our kids, they only have like so many words per day that they can hear. Write it with a note. And the note could be from you. Like you could, like if I saw the milk on the counter, I could take a little sticky note and say, Maddie, please put this back in the fridge. Love, Mom. Or I could make the note from the milk and say, Maddie, I'm gonna go bad. Put me in the put me in the fridge. Love, milk. I saw in the book they used one example where they wrote the note from the dog. They like left it right by the leash and said, "Dear Jimmy, I really have to go to the bathroom. Take me for a walk, please. Love the dog." You can be really creative with it, and it plays into that playfulness side, and then they start to laugh, and then they usually cooperate because they're like, "Oh, that was so silly," you know. And it can be this like funny moment. Um, I think that these can be 5 different tools that we can use for that battle of needs, right? That we can communicate better, describe the problem, give information, say it with a word, talk about your feelings, or writing a note. And I love that there's like a variance, right? Like for some kids, like for Hunter, the note would really bother him. But Maddie, she loves notes. I wrote her notes in her lunchbox and she saves them. She literally has like every note I've ever written her. It's like so sweet. Whereas Hunter's like throwing them away, you know? So you want to find the one that works for your kid, right? The cautions that the authors give about these. One, we want to be authentic. Like, especially if you're going to talk about your feelings, make sure that it doesn't come across fake. Kids are really good at reading between the lines, especially our teens. So we want to make sure that it comes from a place of authenticity. The other thing they talk about is if you use the one word approach, don't use your kid's name, because what can happen is that if I am like Hunter, he's going to associate his name with a negative emotion. So choose a different word, like bees, milk, whatever it's going to be. The other thing that they recommend, and I think this is so important to remember as parents, it takes time to change the course of a ship. Like they can't think about big cruise liner ships. They can't turn on a dime, right? It takes time for them to move. The same is true of our families and our relationships. So if you try these tactics and they don't work the first time, that's okay. You got to give it time and be patient. And that can be really frustrating because we want cooperation. I just need you to do what I want you to do, right? So like take the time, and it's okay if you get frustrated and you just keep trying. It will the ship will turn, it will get better, they will cooperate, but it does take time. Okay, feelings, cooperation. Okay, next one, punishment. Okay, so this is often a hot topic of conversation, and there's lots of beliefs about punishment, whether it's culturally, like my husband is Hispanic and he grew up with a very rigorous, rigid form of punishment, which is very different today in like he's 40, right? So 40 years later, and also culturally. I think it's something for us to consider. When there's misbehavior, what do we do? Punishment is very much woven into the fabric of our society. And the book talks about this, like, you know, whether it's spanking or taking away things, or you can't go to this sleepover. We need to ask the question of how effective is punishment, right? Misbehavior happens, all kids misbehave. What is the most effective way to respond when misbehavior occurs? The author talks about, this is an idea that I found very radical the first time I heard it. Punishment is a distraction. Instead of facing the misbehavior and making amends and problem solving, a child could become so preoccupied with the punishment that's given them that they then enact revenge fantasies and negative emotions. So, for example, my son loves video games, like as most kids do, video games, right? And I know that if I take away his video games, like that's the point that hurts for him, right? Most every other punishment, like if he can't go out and play with his friends, or hey, you can't watch TV, it's the video games for him, right? When I take away his video games, there have been instances I've noticed he does something wrong and I take away the video game. His sole focus is just about the video games. And I'm so angry at you, Mom, that you took away my video game. And he's so like worked up that he like misses the whole point of the misbehavior and how to fix it and how to make amends and not repeat the same behavior. Right. So it's an interesting point for us to consider as parents, that if my kid misbehaves, how can I respond in a way that is going to focus on the misbehavior, correct it, make amends, and ideally problem solve so that that behavior doesn't continue? Because that's what we want, right? When there's misbehavior, we don't want that behavior to perpetuate. So the authors offer several alternatives to use. I'm going to run through them pretty quick, but then I'm going to give you examples because you won't use every single one of these every single time. You might use one or two of them. You also, these aren't sequential in any way, shape, or form. And when we're done with this presentation, I was just thinking, Sandy, if you want, I can email this to you and you can email it out to people if that's something that would be helpful. I'm more than happy to do that because these ideas are not my own; they're from the book. So, okay, so these are what they recommend. Point out a way to be helpful. Express strong disapproval if they do something. Okay, this is not an okay behavior. State what the expectations are. Show the child how to make amends. Maybe they don't know how to fix the problem. Offer a choice. Take action and allow the child to experience the consequences of their misbehavior. And I will say that last one is usually really powerful. Okay, so let's use this example. Let's say you're in the grocery store. Let's say I'm in the grocery store with Max, my 3-year-old, and he starts running around. I could say to him, hey, Max, we can't run in the store. Could you help mommy pick out some apples? I kind of offer point out a way to be helpful. Hey, Max, you cannot run in the store. You might knock something over. Funny story. One time I was in the store with my kids. We were in the wine aisle. And I said to the kids, don't touch anything. You might knock over the wine. Well, a bottle of wine got knocked over. And guess who knocked it over? Me. It was so embarrassing. Anyway, okay, so I could say to Max, like, hey, don't run in the store. You might knock something over. Hey, Max, you might run into someone and they might get upset. I could state the expectation. Max, you need to not run. If let's say he continues to run, hey, Max, I can offer him a choice. Max, you need to either walk or you can sit in the basket. Which one would you like? Let's say he continues to run. Then I'm going to pick him up and say, Max, you have chosen to sit in the basket. I'm going to put you in the basket, right? Those, let's take it a step further. Let's say I put him in the basket and then he starts screaming. Maybe this has totally happened to me. And then I have to leave the store, right? Because I just can't calm him down and I'm flustered. I take him home. The next time I go to the store, I will say to him, hey, Max, I would love for you to come to the store, but you can't come this time because you didn't behave last time. That's the consequence, right? Those are alternatives to punishment. And what was really powerful of them is they're in the moment. I'm teaching the desired behavior. I'm offering them choice and I'm allowing consequences. Another example would be, let's say my daughter says to me, hey, Mom, can I borrow your sweater? And I let her borrow my sweater and she brings it back to me and it gets a hole in it, right? I could say to her, like, Maddie, like, this is my sweater. I'm really frustrated that there's a hole in it, right? Strong disapproval. I can state the expectation. Hey, if I'm going to lend you a piece of clothing, I need you to take care of it and return it to me how I gave it to you. Show the child how to make amends. Maddie, you really do need to apologize to mommy for this. Or, hey, Maddie, you need to put money towards buying mommy a new sweater, right? That we can really use these moments. And what I love about all these, we're using the moments as teaching moments. I do not think that we should shield our children from consequences. Those are the moments where they learn the most, right? Where I say to Maddie, you can't borrow mommy's clothes anymore. Or Max, you can't go to the store with me. Or I have a client with a 15-year-old who every time he goes out with his friends, he goes to places he's not supposed to go, or he misses curfew. So now he doesn't get to go out with those friends. Our kids need consequences. But we want to make sure that they're in the moment, they're real time, and they're connected to the misbehavior because that's where they're going to learn. Okay. Whew. Oh, look at all these animations. Let me run through them. Okay, so we got feelings, cooperation, punishment. Okay, the next thing they talk about is autonomy. So here's the thing. With our young children, autonomy, and even with our teens, it can be a tough topic with parents because we love our kids. We want them with us, right? I don't always want to encourage autonomy because I like to be their superhero. I like to be in their lives. But at some point, we do need to encourage autonomy because part of us in parenting is we're teaching them to become adults. We're teaching them one day to launch into the world. And so even at a very young age, I can encourage autonomy. And they offer some really practical ways to do this. So let them make choices. Now, obviously, you don't let them make every single choice, right? Like this has to be age appropriate, but things like, do you want to have orange juice or apple juice? Do you want to sit in the cart or do you want to walk? And as they get older, we can give them more autonomy. The thing about if we don't let our children make choices is that it can actually lead to hostility where they will feel like they are in a cage, and then it will negatively impact the relationship. So this idea of choice, this idea of autonomy is so important because it really is an important life skill. It makes your kid happier and it gives you a little more breathing room, although it might be a tricky one to navigate. Um, Show the respect for their struggle. I struggle with this one with tying shoes because I'm like, just let me tie your shoe, right? But they got to learn to tie their shoes. And if I ignore their struggle, then I'm like almost invalidating them, and saying, you aren't smart enough to figure this out on your own. We don't want to ask too many questions. A good example of this is if your kid comes to you and says, why does grandma come to see us every week? I could say something, well, why do you think? Just one question, right? Or when this is a big one a lot of us parents do. They get home from school and how was school? How was your lunch? How was your math class? Like we're peppering them with questions. Just start with, hi, I'm so glad you're home. Just start with that, right? Because what it does is it gives them the chance to maybe then talk to, oh, hi, mom. How was your day, right? Don't rush to answer the questions. I kind of talked about that a little bit. Encourage them to use sources outside of the home. This is one of my favorite. It's very empowering them. If like my son hates to floss. Mom, why do I have to floss all the time? That's a great question, Hunter. The next time we're at the dentist, we should ask. My dad is actually a dentist, so I'll say, hey, why don't you call your papa and ask him? It can take the burden off of us to have all the answers, right? I'll be like, hey, we should Google that. My son loves like planets and solar systems, and I do not know anything about that. So I'll be like, let's Google it. I don't know, bud. Let's figure it out. And we don't want to take away hope. And what I mean by that is, let's say your kid says to you, I'm going to try out for the lead in the play. We might be tempted to say, oh, that's great, but you might not get the play, the part, so don't get too upset. Instead, we could say something like, wow, that's going to be a really interesting experience. I wonder what's going to happen. We do want to ground our kids like in reality, right? Like if my son was like, I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player, and maybe he doesn't play baseball, that might be a moment where I might say, all right, buddy, let's talk about this logistically. But if it's something that is a total possibility, they could get the lead in the play, we don't want to take that away. Just say, wow, that could be a really interesting experience. Or, hey, you want to be an engineer one day. Wow, that's exciting. Tell me about it. We want to encourage that conversation, encourage that hope. This step can be really hard to do for two reasons. One, we're busy. My son had to do a poster for school this week, and we had like one, he didn't tell me about it till the day before it was due. And then we had like an hour because he had baseball practice. I had a client call, and I'm like, okay, we got to do it in this hour, right? And so I'm like, come on, let's do it. Let me just type it for you. Let me just Google it for you. We can't do that because it robs them of this chance to be autonomous, to be independent, to do it on their own, to show themselves that they can do it. The other thing is that it can be bittersweet to lose their dependency on us. My youngest is probably the last kid I'm going to have. And I struggle with this. Like, he's my last baby. So I'll just let him have his binky. It's fine. Like, I baby him a lot. My husband is like, come on, Cara, like this could be negative for him. Right. But that's about me. That's a me issue. That's not a him issue. Right. So we do have to check in with ourselves of like, okay, how am I processing this loss of their dependency on me? Okay, last thing, praise. So we got feelings, cooperation, punishment, autonomy, praise. This is a really important topic to consider because children need to develop a healthy self-esteem. And we hear a lot about this today, where we see kids lack motivation, they lack maybe skills to go accomplish things. Healthy self-esteem development is a critical piece of their mental health and a critical piece of their formation as a person. And praise, funny enough, can actually hinder the development of healthy self-esteem. Which sounds crazy, right? Because you're like, okay, but if I'm telling my kid, you're smart, you can do this, wow. Like, why does it inhibit? Because that is all external motivation. That's all external praise. We need our kids to develop internal. And so the authors offer a really healthy way to help our kids develop healthy self-esteem. They call it descriptive praise. It takes a few more steps than just saying, wow, you got an A on your math. I'm so proud of you. But it's really powerful. There's only 2 steps to it. Number 1, the adult describes with appreciation what they see or feel. My daughter has 1 billion stuffed animals. So when she makes her bed, she places them all in these like unique places. Okay. So when she makes her bed, I will walk in. I'm like, wow, you made your bed. I love how you pulled the blankets up. I love that the big unicorn is there and the medium one is on top and the small one's on top of that one. Like I just describe what I see. That's really creative. And then I just pause. And the child is then able to praise themselves. Yeah, usually she'll say, yeah, mom, I thought, from large to medium to small. And I put all the owls over here and I put the princesses over here. It gives them the chance to praise themselves. And it's really powerful. And that's the step that allows them to build self-esteem, right? So if I say the math test comes home, wow, look at that math test. I see that you got all your 9s in the right direction. My daughter inflips her numbers a lot. And yeah, mom, I did. And I remembered to do them and I got 20 out of 20, right? We want to give them that chance to praise themselves because that's really, really important. This is another area where the power of one word, I'm telling you guys, the power of one word, it's so powerful. Feelings, and with praise too. It helps them, we can give them a verbal snapshot of themselves and we can even introduce new words to them. My daughter struggles in math. Like it's hard for her. And so I said to her the other day, I said, Maddie, I see that you every night are practicing your math. You are tenacious. She's like, what's tenacious, mom? I'm like, someone who is tenacious, they don't give up. You don't give up. You keep trying. And wow, you are tenacious. She's like, yeah, mom, I am tenacious. And she'll bring home her math. Mom, I was tenacious. And it's just this really sweet moment. So the power of one word, that is another thing that we can do. Okay. Last slide, you guys. All right. Taking all this in and like after reading this book, one thing that I encourage us to consider, what are things going to be like in 10 years? Like 10 years from this moment. In 10 years from this moment, my son is going to be 19 years old. My daughter's going to be 18. That thought terrifies me. Okay. But I have today to start preparing for that moment. Not only my heart, but my kids, to build their self-esteem, to get their cooperation, to teach them, give them information, the skills that they're going to need for when they are going to be in college or go off into the world and get a job or go to trade school or whatever they're going to do with their lives. It's helpful, I think, as parents for us to pause and say, what is it going to be like in 10 years? Because that starts today. Yes, my power and influence with them will dwindle when they're 18 or 19, but I have today to build connection with them, to talk in such a way that they will listen and listen in such a way that they will continue to talk to me that when they are 18, 19 years old, right? I remember when I went away to college, I was in California, I grew up there and I went away to Ohio and my mom was like, how am I going to talk to you? And I was like, Mom, I'll pick up the phone. I had enough connection and relationship with my mom that I called her like every day that first semester. We can start that today. All these skills, I think, are there's a lot of them, absolutely, but there are things that we can start doing today to build up the relationship with our kids so that in 10 years down the road, they are strong adults, strong individuals, and we have a strong connection with them. Okay, that was a lot, right? So what are you guys thinking? What are you feeling? What's on your brains? You could unmute yourself and go ahead and talk, or you could put it in the chat. Like, what do you want to know more about? I need a sip of water. That was a lot of talking. Anybody? Questions, comments, thoughts, things you liked, things you didn't like?
I did have a couple people ask for the PowerPoint. So thank you very much for that thought. So I will be able to send it on to you guys. If you drop your email in the chat box, I'll be able to get that to you. We also recorded it and we will put it on Rise Up's YouTube. And I believe also Cara will be sharing it. So if you want to go back, maybe you missed something, definitely can go back to that. So don't forget, drop that email in the chat box.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cara. That was a lot of information. I took notes. I loved
Good.
it.
Yeah, I will say when I read that, and so the book is long, and I will say, like I gave you guys the overview. And if there's an area that like really intrigued you, like, oh, maybe the feelings piece or the cooperation piece, or maybe the alternatives to punishment piece. The thing I love about this book is that it gives you like real life examples, like stories of parents who they, like the note to the dog, that story was in here, you know. So if that's something that interests you, that you want more real life examples, the book is a great resource for that. The book also, at the end of every chapter, in addition to the cautions that they give, they also do even more in depth. Like, I can't tell you how much I highlighted and like wrote in this book the first time I read it, and I keep coming back to it. So it's definitely a resource that I think is kind of timeless, that might work right now. And then maybe you nip one problem in the bud, like the feelings, then the cooperation comes up, right? And I can't get my kid to cooperate. You can come back to it. So I definitely encourage, yes, I'm going to send out, yeah, I'll send a PowerPoint and watch the video, but you could also check out the book if you want even more detailed, which sounds crazy, right? But even more detailed examples or explanation of the concepts that I talked about.
Awesome. Thank you, Cara. I have it set because we use the same Zoom link for my teen classes too. So they can only send information to me. So you're getting tons of thank yous. They love it. They've enjoyed it. Somebody asked where you can get the book. I'm not Amazon, but I'm sure lots of other places in addition to that.
Yeah, it's like 3 million copies have been sold or something. It's definitely one of the top parenting books. When parents come to me, what's a parent book you recommend? This is one of my top 3 for sure. So
That's awesome.
I got mine off Amazon, but yeah, definitely you can find that. And I would encourage you, if you do have like a teen, to get the teen version, or if you have the young kid, get the young kid version. While this one is, like I said, it's very overarching, I do think those books are a little more specific in the examples they give. I know when I, like with my toddler who refuses to potty train right now, I'm going to the little kid book because it's just right where he's at, you know?
Mm-hmm. I just recently listened to, and somebody asked what's the name of the book again, and it's How to Listen. So, no. Cara, say it.
I know, right? How to talk so kids will listen, and listen so kids will talk.
Thank you. So that's the title. And like Cara said, there are a couple versions of it. You can also, I know how I like to read books is I like to listen to it while I'm doing other things. So if you're local to me, Hoopla and Overdrive are connected to the Hamilton County Library, and I get a ton of books through there. And this one is one of them that I recently revisited because I didn't read it actually, but I revisited it, and the little kid one. And even though none of my kids are little anymore, it still had lots of applicable information that I was able to gain from it.
Yep.
Awesome.
Awesome.
No questions?
I answered them all.
It was that informative and amazing. No, but it really was. And if there aren't, I took down, everyone that sent their emails and whatnot, I took them all down. I will be sending it to you. Check for an email tomorrow or on Monday. And did you have something to say? And I don't want to take anyone else's time anymore. I can't even talk. One of my children made a noise and I got distracted. But thank you all so much for being here tonight. And Cara, thank you for that. It was fantastic. Greatly appreciate it. And all of you guys have a great night. Be on the lookout for next month's parent meeting or parent workshop. We'll have one every month, different presenters. So stay tuned for that too. Thank you. Good night.